a.m. Thank you very much to Tommy Sandu and the Breakfast team. My name is Nihal. This is the phone-in show on BBC Asian Network. This morning, I'm talking about comments made by Baroness Cox. She has said that Muslim men in some British communities are having up to 20 children each because Sharia law allows them to have many wives. Are her comments helpful or harmful? Do you know any Muslim man who actually has more than one wife? If you do, get in touch. If you don't, equally, tell us. The crossbench peer says Sharia is creating dysfunctional families and that Sharia law discriminates against Muslim women, who she says need better protection. Do they? Is she right? Is it the Sharia or is it the culture that she's talking about and mistaken the two? Is she demonising Islam or is she raising an important point? After all, it is Muslim women who came to her. You tell me.
But you see...
So, Baroness Cox stood up in the House of Lords and said Muslim men in some British communities are having up to 20 children each because Sharia allows them to have many wives. Are her comments helpful or harmful? And Baroness Cox will be on shortly taking your calls. The crossbench peer says Sharia law is dangerous because it allows Muslim men to do what they like with impunity. She seems to imply that there are lots of Muslim men out there with lots of wives. Is that even true? Do you know anyone with more than one wife? She said all of this in a speech in the House of Lords while trying to push through her gender equality bill. But is what she says even true? How many of you know a Muslim man with more than one wife? What does the Sharia actually say about the rights of women? Is she mistaking culture with the Sharia? Or is she right? Are there elements of Sharia law which do discriminate against women? And if so, what are they? She's coming on to this show. She wants to hear your opinions. So please share them with us. Take this opportunity. She will go back to the House of Lords after having this conversation with you. And who knows? She may learn something new about Islam because it seems, certainly by her comments, that she has been given a very one-sided opinion about Sharia law and what it says about gender equality. Perhaps you can put her right. We are going to be, of course, discussing this with someone who is a scholar for the Islamic Sharia Council. So we hope to have a very interesting conversation. But please tell me, do you think her comments are helpful or are they harmful? Are they demonising Muslims? Or are they helping to get a discussion going so that we do not hide behind the shield of political correctness and we have very open conversations with all the communities that live here in this country? There are 2.7 million Muslims in the UK. How many of them have more than one wife? How many of them have 20 children by these 2, 3 or 4 wives? Be interesting to know. No other radio station will be able to speak directly to the Muslim community like the BBC Asian Network does. So take this opportunity to tell us what you think. 81869 on the text. Email nihal@bbc.co.uk. It is 11 minutes past 10. You're listening to Nihal live on the BBC Asian Network. So, what do you think? The independent crossbench peer, Baroness Caroline Cox, has spoken to a number of Muslim women. And let's find out from her now what those Muslim women said to her about their treatment. Baroness Cox, good morning.
Good morning.
What did these Muslim women tell you about their treatment?
Well, we've had conversations with a lot of Muslim women friends, and their concerns include some of the provisions under Sharia law which give them a really very difficult time. For example, the fact that the man can say I divorce you 3 times, but for a woman to get a divorce, she has to often to pay, she won't have the money to pay, she has to go through conditions that are very difficult. That leaves them in a very difficult situation. Secondly, polygamy. Some ladies are being married into polygamous marriages without even realising they're polygamous marriages. Some are forced or required to go abroad to marry a husband so he can get a visa and bring him back to this country. And to just say, there's a very brave Muslim friend of mine, Habiba John, who wrote a report on some of these problems affecting the lives of Muslim women in the West Midlands. So, I'm deeply concerned. This should not be happening in this country, where we're meant to have equality between the genders, and women are really suffering in ways which make our famous suffragettes turn in their graves.
Baroness Cox, let's be joined in this conversation by Khola Hasan, who is a scholar for the Islamic Sharia Council. Khola, good morning to you.
Good morning, Nihal.
What would you like to say to rebut some of Baroness Caroline Cox's points? Although, let's begin by saying that both of you equally believe in gender equality and women's rights. So we can park that and then move on to these specifics about the Sharia collar.
Okay, well, I think she's terribly confused about the difference between cultural issues, especially in the Southeast Asian community, and Sharia, which is a religious law that protects and leads the lives of Muslims. She doesn't seem to know, for example, when she says that people go into foreign marriages and are forced to go abroad and bring people in because they want to, get a British passport. So somehow they're suddenly equated with Islam and Sharia, whereas it is a cultural practice among many communities where there is poverty and they want to bring in, cousins or whatever from abroad. Nothing to do with Sharia. As far as the triple talaq is concerned, she talks about the fact that a man can pronounce divorce 3 times and that's it. This is again a cultural issue very common in the Southeast Asian community. And in fact, one of the jobs we do at the Islamic Sharia Council is constantly educate the community that this is not the Islamic way of divorcing. She talks about the fact that conditions when a woman applies for a divorce can be very harsh. She has to stipulate conditions. Again, that's absolutely untrue. When a woman asks for a divorce and she applies for one, the conditions that are put in the divorce contract are going to be as generous as possible to whoever is the victim in that, which is generally the woman. She's talking about polygamy. Polygamy happens in all sorts of communities. Polygamy actually happens in Britain in the non-Muslim community, but it's called affairs, where men are having multiple partners and having children, abandoning them and walking away. This is an issue that is common to all sorts of societies where men just sleep around, have relationships, have children and abandon them. So I'm just really concerned that she's picking on the Muslim community to do with issues that have nothing to do with Islam, nothing to do with Sharia. She's making this assumption and she's trying to drum this into people's minds that Sharia is this really frightening spectre that we need to be terrified of. Doesn't seem to know what Sharia actually is. I think that's the first thing she needs to tell us.
Okay.
What on earth is Sharia?
All right, Baroness Cox.
Hello. Yes, certainly. What I'm speaking about is information that has been brought to me by Muslim women who have indeed gone either to Sharia mediation or arbitration tribunals where Sharia law does inherently discriminate against women. That is well known and it can't be denied. The man can say I divorce you 3 times and the woman does have to go through conditions, does have to pay.
Does she not have to return her dowry, which is not the same as paying because she was given
often she has
a group
to pay a fee
money?
to the Sharia Council. I spoke with the heads of Sharia courts about this and got the evidence for this.
Are these legal fees, which would be common, of course, across civil law as well?
They would call it. But one Muslim lady said to me, okay, my husband divorced me, technically I can get a divorce, but I'm like a woman sitting tied to a chair with an open door. I can't go through it because I can't get the money to get my divorce, and I want to get a divorce because I also want to be a devout Muslim. I don't want to have another relationship without having legally Islamic law registered divorce, but I can't get it because I haven't got the money. My husband won't give it.
Right, no, I understand that point. Let's bring Khola Hasan back in on this, because is this an example, Khola, of men interpreting Sharia law to benefit themselves as opposed to the Sharia law itself being misogynistic?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. The Quranic stipulation is very clear that when you give a divorce, it should be written down in front of witnesses. It should have, the woman present there and some sort of scholar present there, and etc., etc. So at the Islamic Sharia Council, for example, we encourage men when they want to give a talaq, just as when a woman wants a divorce, the men should come in as well, pay a fee, have witnesses present, have the whole thing stamped, written down, and a divorce certificate is issued. So we're treating both sides exactly the same. Sadly, over the years, in various communities, the culture has emerged where the man can do as he likes and the woman has to struggle. But that is not Sharia law, and that's the point I'm trying to make. That if a culture has problems, that is what we're doing at the Islamic Sharia Council. We're trying to educate our own community, and to make these kind of comments is completely irrational.
Baroness Cox, have you, as of course one of your fellow peers has accused you of doing, in fact, demonise Muslims rather than what seems to be the smarter thing to have done, which is encourage the education of people in the administration of Sharia law rather than demonising Sharia law and Muslims in the process?
Well, thank you. 2 points there very quickly. quickly. One is on the issue of what is really happening to Muslim women in this country, which is what concerns me passionately. I've had a lady come to our all-party parliamentary group getting evidence on these issues. She was just sent her divorce from her husband through the post, without a witness, without a signature, and her mum said she was indeed divorced. Now, that is utterly unacceptable. It happened.
But Baroness Cox, that goes back to my point about actually what you should be focusing on is the administration, the education of the administration of Sharia, rather than demonising the Sharia full stop.
I'm not demonising. Lord Sheikh accused me of that. He was immediately put down by Lord Carlisle, who was a very famous legal lawyer, who immediately said this bill is nothing to do with demonising Islam. It's to do with gender discrimination.
Well, okay, of the 2.7 million Muslims, Baroness Cox, in this country, do you have any reliable figures as to how many men are practicing polygamy?
Well, I'm glad to say that the government is going to look into an investigation into what's happening. So that will help to give us the facts and the figures. I'm concerned about the large numbers of ladies who have come to me because they...
Define large numbers.
Well, you can't because...
Well, no, you can because they've come to you, so you know how many.
We know there are 100,000, so it's believed, according to...
No. You said the large numbers of women who have come to me. How many?
Yes, significant numbers, and they speak for many...
No, you see, you've said large and you've said significant now, but you haven't said a number. How many?
Can you let me finish the sentence?
No, I won't, because you've said large and significant, and I've asked specifically for numbers. Because if you are... Wait a minute. The newspapers have been reporting this. They, of course, send their own messages out about Sharia law and Muslims, etc., etc. Now, we need to get a sense of how big a problem this is. Otherwise, you could be accused, and I'm doing this so your own arguments are not undermined. You could be accused of just simply jumping on one or two examples in the same way we could jump on one or two examples of Catholic priests. That does not make the entire Catholic clergy full of paedophiles. You're jumping on one or two examples when there are 2.7 million Muslims in this country, and then extrapolating from that there is this huge problem for Muslim women in this country. So I have to be very, very strict with you on telling me how many people do you think, or how many people have come to you. You've said significant, you've said large, but you don't have a number.
No, because the ones who come are themselves writing and reporting what's happening in Muslim communities themselves, like Habiba John, who wrote a very good report, what's happened to Muslim women in the West Midlands.
So you're not keeping a record?
The 100,000, they've told me, this is out in the papers, not from me, but from other people, 100,000 are living in marriages that are not legally registered by English law, and therefore very vulnerable to these situations.
But if that is an understanding of the women...
You've asked me a question you have not given a chance to answer.
Oh, go on then.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Well, you didn't answer it on the first two occasions, so let's try the third.
About why not educate the Muslim women. That's what we need to do. The whole purpose...
No, I didn't say that.
...to provide education for ladies, Muslim women who come to this country, to know what their rights are. And that's the main focus of the bill. You can't live in a free society and access your rights.
But what about the focus on the men who are administering the Sharia law itself? Khola Hasan, who is a woman, who is from the Islamic Sharia Council, who is a scholar, she herself is saying that there needs to be this education, and you yourself are confusing culture with religion here. And the administration of the Sharia law is what needs to be looked at, and what needs to be made sure to the men administering it that they actually understand it. Because, Khola, am I right in thinking from your opinion that there are men who are implementing this law who are not implementing it to the letter of it?
Oh, absolutely, yes. I mean, there's incredible ignorance. I mean, the first thing is that, Baroness Cox has said that the women who come to this country, most of the Muslim women in this country are British. They were born here. So they're not foreigners who are suddenly arriving and haven't got a clue what is going on. And secondly, yes, there are all sorts of Sharia councils, and not just Sharia councils, by the way, mosques as well. People will go to a mosque just to get some advice. And often, if you just look at the background of how some of these mosques were established, what is happening in northern cities especially, we don't actually know what is happening. And I think I welcome the fact that the government has said that it would like some sort of investigation. But the truth of the matter is that we have had no investigation. We've got no numbers. We don't know how many people practice polygamy. Baroness Cox just said that they are not legally registered marriages. Well, if they're not legally registered, how do you know what the numbers are? And this is absolutely crucial to the debate, that we've just got figures being thrown and...
No, we don't have any figures. I mean, Baroness Cox has pointed out 100,000, which she said she got from a newspaper. So she hasn't even bothered to do the research to find out where those numbers come from. Have you, Baroness Cox?
Well, I'm sorry. The 100,000 is there in the public domain, come from...
No, it isn't. It's just been made up.
I can't have the details. I talk to Muslim women and I represent what they have told me, and I'm delighted that we agree on the fact that there needs to be more knowledge, more information, so that we really know the reality. The purpose of my bill is to find the knowledge and find the situation whereby people can know their rights. That's the most fundamental thing. And in a democracy, to access your rights, you have to know what they are. The Muslim women who've spoken to me, who are in Habiba Jan's research, etc., where information I can get, they don't know their rights. They want their rights. And as someone I believe passionately in democracy and rights for every citizen of this land, the main purpose of my bill is to make sure they know their rights. And I can see there's nothing wrong in that whatever. Surely you must want women to know their rights. What is culture? What is religion? What is Sharia? What is practice? All we want in that bill is for people to know their rights and to be able, therefore, to access the laws of the land. And I think we can't disagree on that.
You're saying on the one hand that you want, the bill is not about educating people. The bill is about pointing fingers and saying this community is, misogynistic.
No, that's not what...
Again and again, in all your discussions in Parliament, in your previous attempt to pass this bill, which failed miserably, you said again and again in your discussions that Muslims are misogynistic, women are discriminated against.
Khola Hasan, so to interrupt you a second, but Baroness Cox has had Muslim women coming to her. She hasn't made it up. Muslim women have turned up in front of her and said, this is what has happened to me. So equally, Khola, as a Muslim woman, you can't ignore the fact that there are men imposing these things upon Muslim women.
Of course there are issues.
So let's not make it personal about what Baroness Cox has done or doesn't in the past, because this is actually about the issue of the rights of Muslim women in this country. So you agree on that?
But if we started saying that a Muslim woman has come to me and complained about something, and then to extrapolate from that the whole Muslim community has got a massive problem, and then put that into the popular press, in an age where there's incredible Islamophobia and Muslim women are constantly being targeted on the tubes, on the buses, on the streets. I've had bottles of alcohol thrown at me. I have been abused and called an ISIS supporter. Now, in that kind of environment where Muslim women are terrified because of the Islamophobia that we are facing on a daily basis, to then have newspapers reporting this is what Muslims do, this is what Sharia is.
That's Muslim women then getting it from both sides. They're getting it from their own community because of culture, misinterpreting religion. Then they're getting it from disgusting Islamophobes, who I'm sure Baroness Cox is equally disgusted by, as indeed we are. So surely you can't say, well, we're not going to talk about the problems that exist in the Muslim community because of Islamophobia.
No, we ourselves are talking about it on a very, very public level. There are huge issues within the Muslim community. Forget Islamophobia. Within the Muslim community, we've got major problems. And we are on mosque pulpits, in Sharia councils, in newspaper articles, in books.
But perhaps that's not working. Khola, perhaps that needs the legislative process, it needs statute to enforce this, because left to your own devices, the men who are running these Sharia councils are not doing a job. And you have just admitted that there is a gap in practice and knowledge here.
That is absolutely true, but the legislation that Baroness Cox is trying to put forward in the private members' bill is not about educating the Muslim community or educating Sharia councils.
What do you think it's about?
It is about saying that the Muslim community is inherently misogynistic, that Sharia law is inherently discriminatory. Those are the words that she's used herself in the various discussions.
So Baroness Cox...
You're misrepresenting things outrageously.
Go on.
The bill is about educating, providing Muslim women with the information they need, a statutory obligation on people working in the community to make sure they know their rights and their needs. Misogynistic doesn't appear in the debate, or didn't appear from my words in the debate. The most important thing, and I think was put by Lord Carlisle, who's a very famous QC, he said, in response to Lord Sheikh, who made the claim you have that this is a matter for the Muslim community to deal with themselves, yes, we'll agree with that, but also for Parliament. Parliament needs to be responsible for the law of the land, the way it is implemented, and it is not done in an Islamophobic way at all, but it is done from a concern from these people who've been in touch with me and who have brought case studies which should not be happening in this country.
But Khola, can I say that if we could rely on communities themselves to deal with this internally, as Lord Sheikh has said, we would have had no need for a Forced Marriage Act, would we?
Exactly.
And that's absolutely true. And where there are issues that government can interfere in, that is very good, like the Forced Marriage Act, for example, FGM, etc., etc. The problem at the moment is that, for example, when Baroness Cox has said in previous discussions in the House of Lords that Sharia law inherently discriminates against women and gives women only the half the value of a man's evidence, for example, where has she got that from? She's immediately made an assumption and a claim in the House of Lords that does not exist in Sharia.
Right, well, let Baroness Cox... Okay, let Baroness Cox come.
Inherent in all major forms of Sharia law. These things are there, that a woman's testimony counts for half that of a man's. This is independently known and recognised and admitted.
No, it isn't. You made that up.
I have not made it up, excuse me. That is well recognised. Lord Sheikh himself admitted that the man can divorce a woman unilaterally. I'm saying I divorced you 3 times. The woman has to go through all kinds of conditions. This is well known. And
a woman has what sort of conditions? Sorry, can you answer that? What sort of conditions do you keep talking about?
Well,
you keep using this word conditions.
They have to pay, and I've had this from heads of Sharia councils.
What are conditions?
They have to pay money, and often they don't have the money.
What does a man when he gives us a
Sorry, Khola, let Baroness Cox.
I've had this from the head of Sharia councils. They've come to see me. I've talked to the head of some of the leading mosques in the country, and they acknowledge that the man does not pay, the woman has to pay or meet various other conditions. This poor lady who had a divorce through the post, that was recognised as a divorce. I know this is the reality, and this is something that's cause for concern for us, because women are suffering in this country. And I cannot sit in the red benches in the House of Lords. No, women are suffering in this country in ways that go right against the values of this country, which are people have a right to access the laws, that we are trying to do away with gender discrimination, and that people in this country, as I say, are getting a very unsatisfactory deal according to the values of this country. They want to live in this country.
So are you saying...
Men must abide by the values and laws of this country.
So Baroness Cox, can I ask you, do you think then that Sharia law is fundamentally incompatible with British quote-unquote values?
Well, first of all, anyone has the right in this country for religious freedom. If they accept the inequality from their devout Muslims or people of any tradition, like the extreme end of the conservative end of the Jewish community, if they accept gender discrimination, then they have every right to do so. We're not interfering with their religious freedom. If they're unhappy with it, then I do think we have a right to promote the values of equality between the gender, which this country is committed to, that is fundamentally built into our policies and our legal system, and they have a right to that access, which is part of our country's legal system and part of our country's policies on things like child custody, on things like the domestic violence.
Okay. Well, all right.
Right to the laws of this land.
Yeah. Okay. I'd just like to ask you a question. If a woman owns any property prior to marriage, after marriage, whose property does that become?
Well, this is up to be determined according to whichever system she.
No. In Sharia.
In Sharia, if she wishes, she can take that to an Muslim arbitration tribunal.
Sorry. If the woman owns any property prior to marriage, after she gets married, who does that property belong to in Sharia?
I think that is up to their interpretation. I'm not. But what I would say is.
Sorry. You're not an expert on Sharia.
No, she hasn't got a clue.
I'll clarify it for you. She retains that property. In Sharia, she retains that property. It's belonging to her. I'll ask you another question, if you don't mind, about Sharia. If a woman has any earnings during marriage, either through property or work, how much of that do you think she has to spend on the household?
Well, these are matters to be determined in each case. And
No. I'm asking you specifically about the Sharia.
Yes.
I'll give you the answer. It is entirely hers under Sharia.
Yes, and that's fine, but it may not be very much. And
No, you didn't know that, because if you'd known that, you would have given me the answer. You said it was open to interpretation.
What I'm trying to give you is a bigger answer, what happens in this country, and that is that there are the Sharia courts, and they do operate on the basis of Sharia principles, which are that on the whole, the woman receives a half that of what a man receives in a legacy, and that her voice counts for half that of a man's. That is the Sharia operation.
Is a woman entitled to child support under Sharia?
Well, women, when they are divorced, they get, and it's not a legally registered marriage, they may be left with absolutely nothing.
No. Under the Sharia.
According to Sharia, under Sharia, the husband is meant to provide it, yes.
Right.
Yes,
Okay.
definite. I mean, I'd admit that. That's in right writing.
That doesn't sound very misogynistic to me.
Yeah, but what happens is it doesn't happen. That's the whole point.
Oh, but that's not a problem with the Sharia. And this is Khola's point that she keeps making to you. It is and you're focusing on the rights of the Muslim women, which is understandable, of course, but you're not focusing at all, it seems, because I've asked you the question a number of times, on educating men about the administration of Sharia and their own understanding and the ability of men to be able to distinguish between their own cultural prejudices and what the Sharia actually says.
But we're not different on that. I agree with that 100%.
So why are you not focusing on that? Because it seems to be that until you sort that out...
Yeah, no, I'll tell you why. I'm focusing on it, but that is being dealt with, or will be dealt with, by the government's proposed investigation into where which the Sharia courts operate and the way Sharia law is being implemented. That, I hope, will be addressed, and I welcome that in my debate, by the government's proposed investigation into where it's all working out in practice. My immediate concern is for women who suffer where it's not working out for them, in that they really suffer. They are divorced, they're left destitute. The men do not fulfill their obligations to provide for the women. In the polygamous marriages, they may not even know they've been married to polygamous marriage. They're desperately unhappy. The whole follow through from that is there are a lot of women in this country who are very unhappy with the way in which operating.
Look, agreed there may be, but there are 2.7 million Muslims in this country.
Sure.
And, Khola, from your experience of the Muslim community, which I can imagine is a fairly extensive one, tell me how big a problem this is and what is the Islamic Sharia Council doing about it if there are people who are so frustrated with the process they're coming to see Baroness Cox because they don't feel the Islamic Sharia Council can do anything for them.
That's correct.
Well, we're one organisation. Obviously, there are loads of Sharia councils. Again, we don't even know how many Sharia councils there are in Britain. That's the first thing. We don't know. The Islamic Sharia Council is the biggest. It's the first. It's well known. It has a proper building in London, etc. So everybody focuses their anger at the ISC, but there are loads of smaller Sharia councils. We don't know what they're doing. And if they are sending divorces through the post, if they are not talking to the women beforehand, if they're not dealing with issues to do with maintenance, they are not doing their job properly. And that's why I will...
So you welcome the government?
Yes, I welcome the government. But Baroness Cox has thrown in words. She mentioned domestic violence earlier as if that's a part of Sharia. She mentioned child custody as if Sharia doesn't give custody to children.
Men are allowed to chastise their wives within limitations. But in Britain, that is not acceptable by where we are now at.
And Muslim charities north of the border in Scotland, Baroness Cox, set about trying to re-educate Muslim men about this.
Great.
And they did, because Muslims themselves realised that this is a wrong interpretation of their own faith.
Exactly, but had they stopped it happening?
We haven't stopped women. We haven't stopped men raping women. There were looking back a few years, there were over 400,000 instances of where women were victims of sexual assault in this country.
But it's important to know is that they can get caught up with British law. They can get held to account by British law, and they can receive the due punishment. One of the problems in very closed communities, the book by Hannah Shah, The Imam's Daughter, is a true life story, that the women in these communities have a real problem in getting out and seeking the professional help, seeking the prosecutions, because they'll be bringing shame on the family, shame on the community. So a lot of this is not coming within the remit of English law.
Okay.
But that's nothing to do with Sharia, is it? That's to do with the cultural issue, where women feel that it is okay or the men feel it is okay. Domestic violence is a massive issue throughout society. I don't think there is a simple community in which domestic violence does not take place.
Absolutely. And of course, there are white British communities, Baroness Cox, where people turn a blind eye to domestic violence going on within their own families. Now, what do we put that down to?
We put that down to at least they can come within the remit of English law.
So can Muslims? Look, the Sharia is not a magic shield that stops Muslims from being liable to be prosecuted under English law. It's not, is it?
Well, it operates in this way, that there are the councils, and as you've said, you don't know how many of them there are. There are the tribunals, which are inherently discriminatory when they operate on Sharia principles, and the whole point is these are very different from the rest of the British legal system, where we do not have inherent gender discrimination in the legal system. I'm sorry, I promise I'll speak for 20 minutes.
Okay.
It's running out of time.
Right, well, just quickly, Baroness Cox, because a caller wants to just ask you a question. Rab is in Birmingham. Rab, good morning.
Hello there, good morning, Nihal.
What would you like to ask Baroness Cox?
Well, I'd like to ask her a very simple question, is what's wrong with having more than one wife? Would you rather men have loads of actual girlfriends and then have loads of children, out of marriage that then won't know who their fathers are, and their fathers won't be looking after them, and then this government will then have to be chasing to find out who the fathers are, and there'll be
polygamy.
Distinguish who the fathers of the children are.
Rab, polygamy is permitted if there's a need for it. However, the Quran discourages it as it's difficult to treat more than one wife as equal and to support children.
Right,
That's the Quran itself.
I'll tell you what it says in our religion, okay? Love is something which you cannot treat somebody equally. But other than that, every other way you have to treat the wife equally, which is a very, very hard task.
Do you have more than one wife?
That's totally relevant whether I have or I haven't. I'm ringing up because I have heard so much actual.
Well, it's relevant. It's relevant to this question because if you have more than one wife,
I have 20 wives. Just say for argument's sake, I have 20 wives.
Well, you're not allowed to. Quranically, you wouldn't be allowed to, so you'd be going against your faith.
Islamically, Nihal, if you can't treat them equally, then you're not allowed. This is what Islam says, okay? If you can't treat them equally, then you're not allowed to have more than one wife, right? But the question I'm asking is, what is wrong with having more than one wife?
How can you care equally?
I'll say the word nearly,
yeah,
because I don't want to point fingers at yourself or myself, but nearly every man out there has either had an affair or, is having an affair or has a one-night stand
very
with somebody,
different. Very different. Wait a minute, Rab.
Yeah.
Very different to having a completely different family or 2 and 3 different families where you have. Wait a minute, because how can you? I mean, I find it very difficult just to give my 2 children equal love. If there are 20 children, how do you give them equal love?
Hang on a minute, Nihal. You obviously can't give, for example, your love to more than one person. So in that case, you wouldn't have a second wife.
No, I'm talking about children.
Okay. No, you wouldn't have a second wife.
I'm talking about children.
Then, right? Right. If one other man who can, for example, have more than one actual relationship where he's got a second girlfriend somewhere, or he's having
I can have plenty of relationships. Let's talk about children. Actually, wait a minute. Rab, 1 second. Rab, 1 second. Baroness Cox wants to come back in.
I've really got to go. I'm enjoying the discussion.
Very quickly, go on, Baroness Cox.
Quickly, the law of this land actually prevents bigamy, prohibits bigamy. People want to come to this country, they should respect the law of this land. And that is actually violating the law, and that's one of the great problems. And the other thing is, talking to many of my Muslim friends who are in polygamous relationships, they say they do not get the support from their husbands, and they're deeply unhappy. So we have 2 issues there. One is bigamy is against the law of the land of this country. People have chosen to come to live, should respect the law of the land they've come to live. And the women who are in polygamous marriages under Sharia law, where it's allowed, they are often desperately unhappy and are not cared for. So I'm grateful to Rab for raising that issue because it highlights a lot of the problems which I want to address. But my main purpose is to help Muslim women in this country enjoy the full rights and laws of this land where they are living today, and that's the purpose of the bill. Not Islamophobic, concern for Muslim women. Thank you for letting me share your discussion. Sorry to have to love you and leave you, but I've got to run.
Baroness Cox, thank you very much indeed. Rab, she made that.
What you've done there, Nihal.
She made it.
She's spoken for the past 20 minutes. I've only said about 30 seconds.
And you're on here regularly, over an hour, over a year. You speak for hours, Rab.
My friend.
You speak for hours over a year, Rab.
Yeah, it's beside the point. She's speaking a lot of crap on the radio, and she needs to be put right.
Well, wait a minute, with all due respect, Rab, with all due respect, we've just had Khola Hasan. All right.
No, why doesn't the government bring out laws that stop men having affairs?
As a Muslim,
why doesn't every man get locked up then?
As a Muslim, she just pointed out, as a Muslim, you know that if you are living in a land which is not predominantly Muslim, you must adhere to the rules, the laws of that land.
Prince Charles was having an affair on Diana.
No. It's not illegal. It's not illegal to have affairs. It's not illegal to have affairs, but it is illegal to be.
That's worse. It's worse for people to be having children out of marriage, having affairs, actually breaking up homes.
Wait there a second. You just said it's worse to be having children outside of your marriage. Why is that any different to having 2 or 3 wives with children? Why is that any?
10 wives with children. At least those children know who their father is.
What's the point? Wait a minute. What's the point of knowing? Good grief, Rab. Do you know what? Have you taken silly pills? What's the point of having lots of children if you can't be? If they know that you're their father, but you can't be a father to them, that's just a name.
You're missing the point. The point I'm trying to make is
I'm not.
A man that's going to have an affair is going to have an affair, if a man's going to have more than one wife, if he's that kind of
but
man,
it's
that he's
illegal.
gonna have more than one
Rab,
wife,
it's illegal.
if he's not allowed to have more
It's
than
illegal.
one wife, he's going to have 10 girlfriends.
It's illegal to have more than one wife in this
I'm not
country.
saying it should be made legal. What I'm saying is,
But you asked the question, what's wrong with it?
They're picking on that point of it, but they're not looking at their own society. That half of these white people who don't.
Here's a news flash for you, Rab. Muslims have affairs too. Just to give you a little news flash into your own life, Muslims have affairs too.
Yes, exactly.
So you think a solution to having affairs is being able to marry more than one woman?
That would actually stop you from having affairs. It would stop you from having children out of marriage.
I've got one marriage. I've got one wife. I'm not having an affair.
On how many? What's it called? SDR.
Rob, Rab, are you incapable as a man of being faithful to one woman?
No, it's not that I'm incapable. I said to you first, if a man is going to be incapable, isn't it better for him to have a wife rather than...
No, it's probably better for him to keep it in his trousers.
If that's the case, no man should get married at all, and everybody should go
well, then, do you know what? There shouldn't be any laws against shoplifting, because, I mean, if I'm incapable of being able to pay for something, then I just want to go in and take it, and that's fine.
You're not going and taking it, are you? You're going and making yourself responsible. You're having a wife.
Oh, but how do you know How do you know these men can be responsible? How do you know these people can be responsible? How do you know these people can be responsible? Listen, I ask the questions.
No, you can't always ask the question. You have to also be asked questions as well, because you're making...
Why did I get married? Because I love my wife, and she was going to be my life... Because I found my soulmate, and I want to be with her and her only for the rest of my life.
Single with her?
Sorry?
Why didn't you just carry on just being girlfriend and boyfriend? Why did you have to get married to her?
Well, because that's culture.
Thank you, because it's not just culture.
You say thank you and then go, no. Look, do you know what, Rab? Enough. We're done with you for today. Thank you very much indeed. Let's go to Akram in Birmingham. Good grief.
Hello.
Akram, good morning.
Very good morning. Very, very interesting. Basically, this lady, Miss Cox, who's come on, she wouldn't be involved if Muslim women didn't come to her.
Exactly right.
Yeah, so simple. So there is a problem. There is a very, very big problem. I don't collect statistics, but I'm living within the Muslim community, and there is this hardcore situation where men are actually, abusing and using women. The general course, the trend sort of thing is where obviously in the community, Muslim community, there are less men and more women, and therefore a lot of women are off on the shelf basically, and they're desperate, and they are willing to become second wives or third wives. Now the problem is, what they don't realize is they're going to be left high and dry down the line, because in this country you can only have one wife basically. So only the one wife, the chosen wife, the legal wife under British law will get the rights, if she becomes a widow or she gets the property and whatever. The other ones won't get nothing, because they will be on Islamic paper in this country, which is not recognised. They will be their wife, fine, under Islam, but not under the UK law. So this is very, very urgently needed, and education is needed for women to make sure they know the pros and cons of entering into a marriage, becoming a second or third wife.
Okay, Akram, thank you very much indeed. Let's speak to Yasmin, who's in London. Good morning, Yasmin.
Morning, Nihal. Wow, what a heated debate.
Well, I mean, it is, because, of course, you've got Rab arguing that there's nothing wrong with having more than one wife, but ultimately, and this is a point that Baroness Cox made, what about the children of those wives and how much they get to see? Look, I feel guilty enough when I go away on business, or I'm away and I don't get to see as much of my two children. Now, how are you ever going to get around to see perhaps 10 children if you've got 3 wives? How are you going to do that? How are those children going to get the best of you?
Well, I think there's a whole range of issues that have got really mixed up. So just to say where I stand, I am one of the Muslim women who spoke to Baroness Cox around some of these issues, and I do have an issue with the way that she's presenting it, and that this isn't just about Muslim women. This is also about Jewish women, about Hindu women, Sikh women, and Christian women. I've spoken to lots of African Christian women who are in polygamous relationships. Only they call them customary marriages. And I've been interviewing men and women who are in polygamous relationships and adult children, and I've heard some heartbreaking stories. One young woman I spoke to, who I just want to tell you her experience.
Please do.
Her mother was the first wife. She was brought over from Pakistan. She ended up, looking after her husband's parents. He had 2 children with her, a daughter and a son. And he then had 2 other wives, one white British and one who I never got to the bottom of where she came from. And this man he didn't in any way engage with the first wife. And when I spoke to the daughter, I didn't know at the time of the interview, but towards the end of the interview, she said, I think the most telling thing is he didn't want a wife, he wanted a carer for my grandparents. And if he didn't want to marry my mum, he alleged he was forced to have married her. Then why did he have us? Her mother took her life in the end. The emotional stress, the emotional impact of being in that relationship took its toll to that degree. This young woman is now the carer for her younger brother.
Your father...
And another young person I spoke to said, we were only important to my father as long as my mother was important. And he was a child of the second wife. He was from Indonesia.
But are these men... Okay, so he was from Indonesia. These, in your experience, are these men born abroad who bring their cultural practices with them, or is this a problem as much for British Asian men?
It's as much a problem for British Asians. We haven't got numbers, so some people say 100,000, some people say 10,000. We've got absolutely no idea. What I think has happened is this is the result of religious fundamentalism and extremism. So going back to Wahhabism, which absolutely supports multiple marriage, going back to literal interpretations of the Quran. And I think, in speaking specifically about Muslims, I think Muslim men are taking advantage of the legal loophole so that you have one registered marriage, and Akram makes some really, really valid points, and then you end up having all of these other wives who do not have the same legal standing. And the other point about Sharia councils, which I think got lost in the very heated debate between Khola and Baroness Cox, is that why are we saying to minority women, whether they be Jewish women going to Beth Deans or whether they're Muslim women going to Sharia councils, that actually you have lesser legal status, you don't get the law of the land, you get your religious laws. And we know that all religious laws, because of the time in which they came in and the way that they are interpreted, favour men. They're part of a patriarchal structure.
Well, let's bring Khola back in on that, because that's a very important point. Khola.
Yeah, I think that's really unfair. I mean, you can hear from my voice, I'm a woman, I would not be part of a patriarchal structure. There is incredible ignorance within the Muslim community. What you just said about fundamentalism and Wahhabism just showed that you don't know what you're talking about. The men who are practicing polygamy are not Wahhabis or fundamentalists. They're practicing polygamy often because they just want to have another woman because it's great fun. And it just looks good to be able to say on paper, yes, I've married her. They're actually often treating the first wife or the second wife as a mistress. They're abandoning them, whatever. But these are issues to do with men not knowing how to behave in a decent Islamic environment. It's got nothing to do with fundamentalism or religion. Men who beat their wives don't beat them because religion allows them to. They beat them because they have that streak in them, the vicious streak, which gives them that, I want to beat my wife. It's got nothing to do with religion.
But they find something in the structure to back that up.
No, they don't.
Well, they do. They do, and they have done, Khola. I mean, for you to ignore the fact that they have tried to find... You're absolutely right in that a man who would beat his wife regardless. But the fact is that they do look for, and they feel that they find religious justification for admonishing their wife physically.
We've seen cases, the Sharia Council has been there for 35 years, we've been seeing cases on a daily basis for 35 years, I haven't obviously, but there are, domestic violence is a massive problem within the Muslim community, as it is in every other community.
Yeah.
And when the men are sitting there and we tell them off because we say, how dare you lift a finger to your wife, I have never had a man say to me, my religion allows me. He'll say, oh no, it's because she winds me up or because she's nasty or whatever, and I'll put my hand up and say, I don't want to hear it. You control your hands, you control your mouth, you control your fist. But the point is, it is not religion that's the issue behind this. It is people's weakness, not knowing their faith, not knowing how they're supposed to be behaving. And yes, there is incredible ignorance within the Muslim community, as it is in every other. And that is what the ISC is doing, like mosques, like religious teachers. We are educating. It's a massive community.
But as a woman, Khola, How difficult do you find it to be taken seriously by men?
I get both sides. I get men who walk in and look at me and go, is there somebody important that I can talk to? And I'll say, oh, I'm in charge today, sit down and talk. And I get others who are incredibly receptive and don't have a problem with me. So, it's all sorts, isn't it? I get women who come in and break down and say, oh my God, it's wonderful to have a woman I can talk to because I've got very private things to say. And I've got other women who come in and say, oh, I don't think you're going to be impartial. So it just...
Okay.
I think anybody who's in that sort of position is going to...
Can I just comment? Well, there's a couple of things. One, Khola, I'm not going to stoop to being disrespectful, and I'm also not going to say this is just about Wahhabis. I've seen Sunnis using temporary marriages, which is another thing that is certainly coming out. And in terms of polygamy, we have to accept as Muslims that the Quran justifies the taking of more than one wife. And
the Quran discourages it, though, as it's difficult to treat more than one wife, and there has to be a need for it.
Discourage it, Nihal, but it happens. And men will take, as everyone of any faith background does, you take the bits that suit you, so men take those bits.
But then that's a failure of Sharia councils to say, when the marriage is, to say, what is the need for this, and justify it. And if you cannot justify it, then it cannot take place. The nikah cannot take place.
But it's not to lots of ulama across the world, to lots of theologians who have said to me, because one of the things that I always understood as a Muslim woman was that you had to have the permission of the first wife. And when I started researching polygamy in depth 5 years ago, I held on to that belief, and I have been told by theologians from across the world that actually the consent isn't an issue, and how do you guarantee the consent of the first wife? And if we're talking about marrying because they can't produce children, well, men are also responsible for fertility. Or if she's ill, would a wife abandon her husband if he was ill?
Well, that Khola is a definite issue, isn't it? Where secular laws can look at Sharia and say, well, that is discriminatory.
One of the issues is that, you just said earlier, that is the failing of the Sharia Council if men are taking more than one wife and are not sort of investigating it. Sharia councils normally don't come in at the time of marriage because people don't go to Sharia Council to get married. They go to a mosque or to an imam. And so it is the job of the imams, that's not us. We're trying to educate imams that when somebody comes to a young couple who want to get married, especially if it's going to be done on the sly, very quickly, Saturday afternoon in the house, there's no big party, there's no event, can you ask them questions and check that they have not already got...
Does the imam have the power?
The imams are not registered, the mosques are not registered to carry out weddings, and the imams that I've spoken to have said to me again and again, we would rather conduct a nikah ceremony to stop these young people committing zina. That's what they are saying, and they feel that they are in a bind. No, you need a situation where every single marriage must be registered.
You can't speak at the same time. But what this is pointing out to perhaps a neutral observer is that you are going to have to require British laws to deal with this, because it seems that within yourselves as a community, you're not going to be able to deal with this.
No, I don't think we can.
Khola?
That's probably true. I think that's probably true, yes. But I think if the imam is educated and knows, he can at the time of nikah talk to both parties.
Broadly, Khola, then you must agree with what Baroness Cox is suggesting. You may not agree with the tone, you may not agree with her past statements, but essentially what she is saying is that we're going to need the law to deal with this.
I think the problem is that when you actually look at the bill, it looks fairly non-committal, but when you listen to her discussions in Parliament, in the House of Lords, both last time and this time as well, the language there is openly Islamophobic. And I think that discussion is very, very frightening. So that's the problem.
But throwing the word Islamophobic...
With Khola, she never mentions Beth-Dins, and she never mentions what happens to Jewish women as a result of their own religious tribunals, which is why I'm fundamentally against having religious arbitration in family matters.
Well, let's speak to Imran, who's called in, who's a representative from the Islamic Sharia Council in Leighton. Imran, good morning.
Hi, good morning. How are you?
What would you like to say, my friend?
Well, I've been listening to some of it, and what I've actually realised is, taking into account where everything's happened in the past as well, what the Islamic Sharia Council is really trying to do is move forward and try to find a way where it complements the British system instead of colliding with it. Now, we've been working quite hard for the past few years when it comes to with the police, with the anti-domestic abuse violence policy, with local councils. And we've had a few meetings and a few presentations. And what we realized is there is a lot of lack of knowledge there. And, even when we sat down with the police and discussed and told them what Islamic Sharia Council is, what we do, they said, we didn't actually realize you guys did all this. And they said, we can really work with this and do some good. And we're trying to bring awareness to the fact that there is a lot of issues on the domestic abuse side, which needs to be brought out.
What about polygamy?
Polygamy, again, this is an issue which needs to be dealt with, but it cannot be dealt with just one-sided. It needs to be dealt with cooperation, not by just one side or the other side.
So how do you deal with it? What do you say to Muslim men who want to take on more than one wife?
I think, again, more awareness needs to be brought in, not just...
Awareness of what?
Of what Islam says, not what culture says.
So what does Islam say?
Well, the way is, Islam says, as Khola Hasan mentioned it as well, Islam says that, like you said in the Quran as well, there are reasons for why you can have more than one wife, okay? But those reasons are not being followed right now.
Is the fact that she's ill one of those reasons?
Can I ask a quick question, Nihal, please?
Go on, Jasmine.
How on earth do you separate culture from religion? If you look, whenever I look at the actual, the interpretations, and I've listened to various theologians say, that's culture, that's not religion. But the sense I get is that what they are telling me is the creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in a very sort of Arab mold, which is very tribal, which is vengeful, which is not the Islam that I certainly have been brought up with. I do not think it is possible to make those distinctions and say, well, that's a cultural practice and this is true Islamic practice, and what may be true Islam to one set of Muslims will not be to another.
Therein lies a massive problem.
You can claim to hold true, authentic Islam.
Okay, Imran? Which is obviously what the Saudis claim, presumably.
Yeah. The way we look at it is looking at the Quran and looking at the Hadith. And one thing which I push as well is, yes, when people come to the Islamic Sharia Council, we do say whether you're Pakistani, Indian, Bengali, Somali, any other religion, the culture needs to be put aside, because that's where the complications kick in. Because everybody follows different culture. They say, oh, well, this is how it happens in Pakistan, this is how it happens in India. But no, this is how the Quran says it, this is how the Hadith say it, so that's the way it should be. But the main point which I was trying to make, the reason why I
make it, so hold that thought. We'll carry on this conversation for a little bit more. I'd be interested to know what you think. You can still call us on 08459 440 445. I'm going to try and come up with some solutions here, but an hour to deal with what is a huge issue across the board. And it's fascinating that Yasmin brought up the issue of Jewish women in this respect, also Christian Africans in polygamous relationships as well. Please do get in contact with us and tell us what you think about whether really this issue of polygamy is a massive issue, whether it is possible to have more than one wife. It is not legally possible in this country to have more than one wife. How widespread is it? Are any British Asians interested in this idea? Or is it something brought from other parts of the world? Anyway, indeed, right, lots of talking in that first hour. It shall continue. Imran, who is a representative from the Islamic Sharia Council in Leighton, called in and he wanted to finish his point. Imran, good morning. Thanks for holding on, my friend.
That's okay, not a problem. The main point which I was trying to make here is that, yes, there is, since all of the Sharia law has come into the media, there's a lot more recognition that there are issues that are outlined there that need to be addressed. But what I'm trying to make is that it's not being ignored anymore. I mean, us, in the Leighton, Islamic Sharia Council in Leighton, is actually actively looking at those issues and trying to bridge that gap so that things do work a lot smoother. That's why we're working so heavily on domestic abuse and violence.
So wait a minute, we're not. I mean, I know you keep focusing on domestic violence, but polygamy, for instance. Let's focus on that for a second. If a young man comes to you and says, "Right, I want another wife," what do you think the questions that the imam should ask of that young man, or indeed old man?
Well, first, I'm not a scholar, but I think the first question should be really asked is why? I mean, what's the reason behind it? And to ascertain, is it an Islamic reasoning behind it? But like I said, they don't...
What is your understanding of an Islamic reason?
like I said, I'm not a scholar here. Only a scholar Khola Hasan can answer that better than me. So I don't want to say anything that could be wrong there, because like I said, I don't know that side that well. And
sorry, if you're representing the Islamic Sharia Council,
I've been listening to what I was being saying, and what I've been trying to do there is trying to bridge gaps in different areas, which I have seen that there is a need straight away. Now, these things take time to do, because you need to speak to councils, you need to speak to police, other departments, and work out where there are issues on our side or the other side which need to be addressed.
So what about this, Imran? If you are a Muslim living in the UK, you should not have more than one wife, because it is illegal to have more than one wife.
It is. According to the law of the land, it is illegal to have more than one wife.
And if you're a Muslim living in a predominantly non-Muslim country, you are expected to follow the laws of that land, as long as they do not impinge upon your basic beliefs.
I agree. There has to be a fine line where.
So why is that not clear?
The law.
So why is it
the law of the land?
So why isn't there a clear mandate from whatever Sharia council it is, or the Muslim Council of Britain, or whatever other Muslim society they may be, to say to imams, you cannot grant a Muslim man in this country more than one wife, because it is illegal in this country? Why can't it be as clear as that?
I think it's not that clear, because of the fact that there are so many different pockets of small Islamic Sharia councils, different places which are running their own way, and like which Khola Hasan, they're not being looked at how they're running. They're doing things their own way, unfortunately, some of them, and the imams as well. They're doing things their own way. So I do agree up to an extent. Certain things need to be looked into.
Do you agree that Muslims should not be allowed to marry more than one wife in this country?
Well, I think you should respect the law of the land. That's the way I look at it, simple as that. You should respect the law of the land. If whatever country you're in, you should follow what the law says.
Right.
Without, as well, affecting, at the same time, the law of the land should respect the fact that whether you're Muslim or Jewish and you're following. So there has to be, that's the thing, there has to be a fine line of not...
No, you're absolutely right. An African Christian, an Orthodox Jew, none of these people should be allowed to have more than one wife in this country. Do you think?
I think, like I said, again, it's about respecting the law and the religion without them colliding.
Yasmin,
that's the way I look at it.
Imran, stay there for a second. Yasmin, how likely do you think it is for imams to stand up and actually say that?
But the thing is these men are not breaking the law. Nihal, they're exposing a legal loophole. So they're not committing bigamy because the second, third, fourth marriages aren't
not recognised in English law. Yeah,
they're just having religious marriages, so they're not technically breaking the law. So it's very easy to say that.
But you see, okay, fine. So that's from the British legal perspective. They're not breaking the law.
Yeah.
But from the Quranic justification, I'm obviously not a Muslim, but I've been led to believe over the years of speaking to many Muslims over the years on this show, that you should, as a Muslim, if you're living in a majority non-Muslim land, adhere to the law of the land that you are living in.
Absolutely, but also let's not forget that polygamy was outlawed in many Muslim countries. Tunisia, Libya are just two examples of where polygamy was outlawed.
Well,
under their legal code.
Yeah, they're both countries, of course, that have been under quite considerable change over the last 5 years or so. So I wonder whether that's still the case.
And there's a resurgence, just as there was in Iran after the Iranian Revolution, that we saw polygamy come back.
Right.
But one quick point on culture and religion: polygamy predates Islam. And it was brought into Islam, from my understanding of speaking to all of those religious scholars, was that it was brought into Islam to almost sort of contain something that was what was happening. But so there's that point. The second point is that the Prophet, peace be upon him, said that if Ali wanted to take a second wife, he had to divorce Fatima first. So if polygamy wasn't right for his own daughter, why should it be right for other Muslim women? But you can say this until you're blue in the face to Muslim men. A Muslim man is not going to turn around and say, oh, hang on a minute, I've got this interpretation wrong. What I'll do is I'll change my behaviour. It takes much more than just presenting theological arguments.
Hence why, then, the British law should be involved.
I think British law needs to be involved. I would like to see every single marriage registered. Not just the imams, because marriages don't just take place in mosques. You can get married in your home if the imam comes to the house. which is something else through the forced marriage work that we saw happening an awful lot. I'd like to see every place of worship registered, and I'd also like to see every priest, imam, whatever, ordained registered in terms of being able to carry out a marriage. That will be the only way that we can ensure that this loophole isn't utilised and exposed by men, because it's the women who suffer and it's the children who suffer.
As you well know.
I've worked with women who, he turns up, they're married under Islamic law, he turns up maybe twice a week, spends the night and goes. That to me is neither a husband nor a father.
I would agree.
What's the difference, going back to Raz's argument, what is the difference?
He didn't have much of an argument, to be fair.
No.
He didn't have much of an argument, to be fair. He had a lot of anger, but not much of an argument. Just stay with us for a second. Kay is on the line from Coventry, not her real name. Good morning.
Good morning, Nihal.
You agree with what Baroness Cox is doing, don't you?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I'm saying I'm a neutral observer. I'm not a Muslim, but I think that she was kind of slammed a lot for having no figures to hand. But a lot of the points that have been made today, when people have said, oh, so many people have come to see me, or people visit me here and so on, they haven't actually given figures to support the number of people coming to see them about certain issues. For example, was it Khola who said, when men come to see her and talk about the fact that they've committed domestic abuse and violence against their partners, she wasn't able to, and then said, in all the years I've seen these men, no one's ever held up their hand and said, I've done this because my religion allows me to do this. I wouldn't expect men to say that anyway, perhaps some people, but...
Well, we know that this happens because I did a phone-in show about this very subject when Charity in Scotland was having to say to Scottish Muslim men that there was no Islamic justification, and just to be clear, Scottish Muslim men are not going around beating their wives wholesale, but they felt the need to have to say there is no Quranic justification for this, because they were clearly hearing that some men were trying to justify it.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and also since polygamy, just again, everyone's kind of most people on your show reiterate the fact that if you were living in the UK, we should just be following UK law, and I'm not sure whether Sharia council should exist or not, but basically I don't think they have any legal they can't make any legal decisions, can they?
No.
That are legally binding. So I think women definitely, when they're in a situation where they're being abused, or in the case of polygamy and things like this, they do really need to have the law on their side, the UK law, and that's the only thing that's going to protect them. That's legally binding. And I think when people in mosques, when people are getting married or at home, and the Islamic priests know that the man already has a wife, then they know that the person's breaking the law, or even if they do suspect that they are, they have a responsibility to actually report that. I mean, I know this may not be the right analogy. For example, when I'm driving to work, I see on the back of a bus it says, if somebody in your area is claiming welfare benefents, and the government was encouraging people to dob their neighbours in or whatever. Aren't there these more serious issues where if you know that somebody is committing polygamy, that you ought to be reporting
but they're legally not. That's the point.
They may not legally...
So then you can't report them for a crime they haven't committed. That's the problem. I mean, that's what Yasmin is pointing out, and closing this loophole that even nikah marriages are legally recognised. Therefore, you can't have two nikahs.
So I understand what you're saying. They're not legally doing that, but they know morally. Well,
Quranically as well. If you back up the idea that you must follow the faith of the country that you're living in, as long as it does not, of course, involve you.
So they have a moral duty to all Muslims, women and men, then, that if they know that this person is legally married, that this woman may not then have the same rights within that relationship then. I believe that the Muslim priests have more of a duty to absolutely say no, that we are not going to authorise this marriage, even if it's not a legal second marriage.
Imran, do you know of any imams that would actually do that? Rather than just rubber stamping it, they actually would say, well, what reasons? You have to justify it.
I personally do not know.
You don't know a single imam who would do that?
No, I personally don't know any imam who would do that.
Yasmin, have you come across... Sorry, Imran, I just want to ask Yasmin the same question. Yasmin, have you come across an imam who would actually dig deep and say, well, why do you want to marry another wife?
Yeah, I've also come across the same imam who refuses to conduct any nikahs until the civil marriage has taken place.
Right.
He is a lone figure in all of the imams I've spoken to over the years.
Okay, all right.
And I actually got him to do my daughter's nikah last year because I was so impressed with him.
Right. Imran, you wanted to make another point?
Yeah, and I do, agree with Yasmin. I think that every place that does do a nikah should be registered so that if the marriage does get legally registered with the UK system as well. So
would you encourage then for Muslim women to have a civil marriage before, and that imams do not conduct a nikah until the civil marriage has taken place?
I think that's a good idea, yeah, because it kind of enforces on them that, you need a civil marriage. Because the problem is, when things go wrong, then suddenly they're like, well, we didn't do a civil marriage, protect under the UK law system. And I have to remind, actually, you are still, but you should have done a civil marriage as well. So, this is obviously, we get the backdraft of what people have made mistakes in the past, and then we have to deal with it. But now when we get people, we do say, look, we do encourage it. Please do a civil marriage first, so that these issues do not arise later on.
Okay, well, look, we've run out of time, but Imran, Yasmin and Kay, thank you very much indeed for getting in contact with us today and sharing your thoughts on it. And thank you to Khola Hasan and Baroness Cox, of course, for joining us at the very beginning of this show. Okay.